Hello and welcome to Tuesday Talks.
So guys, welcome back to another week of Tuesday Talks on the YouTubes.
Yeah, so we had a great week this week, having some interaction through our challenges, doing some videos. I liked getting to see some interaction there. We had a good movie, pretty simple, little bit of trivia there. I think we had multiple winners because we only did
On
like
the
4
trivia?
questions.
Yeah.
So there were a few different people that won. I know like Ben Bridges was one, Faith Howell.
I was one.
Yeah, Austin definitely.
I didn't
got
make
it.
the questions,
Yes.
so I didn't cheat.
And then, oh goodness, I'll have to go look.
Yeah, I don't know what it was.
But had a really good time with that. If you're not following on Instagram, go follow our Instagram, cornerstone_HSM or cornerstone_MSM to follow us. And we do the trivia on Thursdays and Fridays, and it's a good time.
Yeah, it's fun. And the challenge this week was you have 6 minutes to write down as many states as you can. I think the high so far was like 44 maybe?
Okay.
Have you done it yet?
Yes. So I learned a song when I was a kid, and I figured, oh, it'll be a piece of cake. I know this. And I got to the M's, and that's where I forgot how the song went. And so from there on, it was just like struggling through what I could think of. And I got, I think it was 39 in the 6 minutes, and then I sat there and just like went through and figured out the rest of them.
Yeah.
But it probably took 10 minutes for me to think of all of them.
I haven't tried yet. I'll probably try it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I don't do the song. I do geographically. I just go coast to coast.
See, that's
So
what
I start
doing,
at Maine, go down the coast, and then just work my way over.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Apparently, the most memorable or least memorable state for me was Missouri. That was the last one. I was like, what is it? It's something right in around Iowa, Missouri. So, anybody from Missouri, so sorry. Totally been there.
The Brunies, Jason Bruni.
Yeah.
He's from Missouri.
Awesome.
So.
So we had a good time with that. We do have a few birthdays this week. We wanted to recognize Carson.
Yeah.
Happy birthday,
Happy
Carson.
birthday, Carson.
Ella Morris. Happy birthday this
Ella.
week. Miss Brandon Russell and TJ Howell, who's usually out here on the chat boards.
Usually pretty active in there.
Yeah.
Trash talking Christian.
So, happy birthday to all of you guys. We know that it's pretty difficult to have a big party or anything going on during the quarantine, but we're excited for you guys and glad to have you. All right, well, we've got a cool subject. We're kind of taking a break for a week from our typical stuff with the Written in Stone series, and we wanted to talk about Easter and some of the theories people have for what may have happened to Jesus other than the resurrection.
Yeah. I'm excited for this one. I like talking about stuff like this. So here's the thing: is like, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I'm not even really intrigued by conspiracy theories. I'm intrigued by conspiracy theorists. So like people who are conspiracy theorists, like I like talking to them because I like they intrigue me. Like you believe all of this stuff, like how you connect the dots and how you come to these conclusions. I'm just like, tell me why you believe this. So around the resurrection of Christ, there's probably nothing that holds more weight than the conspiracy theory surrounding that.
Absolutely. And just to piggyback on what you said, you really get to see how faith truly impacts someone's life when they have some kind of a conspiracy theory they truly believe. If you really believe in aliens, you have like stockpiles of food and you wear aluminum foil on your head or whatever.
And the truth is, it takes a lot of faith to believe in a lot of conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
Like, it really does.
It really does. And I think there's some great Christian philosophers and apologists who kind of talk through these different ideas that people have that either help to prove that God exists, help to prove something about who Jesus is, or ideas that people have to try to disprove or give credence against the claims of the Bible. And sometimes that's kind of the conclusion that it comes down to is, look, it's easier for me to just believe what the Bible says sometimes than to believe this idea that we came up with about what may have happened.
Yeah, just trying to find alternative ways to explain what people believe is sometimes a lot harder and takes more faith and just like a certain amount of intellectual dishonesty just so you can say that didn't happen.
Right.
Yeah.
So tonight we're going to get into a few of these different ideas surrounding the resurrection of Jesus. So let's go ahead and get into the first one.
Yeah, one of the reasons this is fun to talk about is because, like Christmas, Easter is one of those times when a lot of people could show up to church who normally wouldn't be there. And like some of these questions could enter their mind. If somebody wasn't raised in church, if somebody is a skeptic who's not a believer, and we're coming in and we're celebrating the resurrection of Jesus, they immediately could begin thinking like, well, what if it was an alternative option? And so what we're going to talk about tonight is the most like well-known and argued for alternative options.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these are pretty highly debated in some circles, and are things when you go to college that you may come in contact with people who have these worldviews or are going to make you think through these worldviews. And you may even run into them in high school, or neighborhoods, those kinds of things as well. So it's good for you not to be caught off guard by someone who has already kind of thought through some of this a little bit, but instead to prepare yourself and to have a good explanation for, I don't really buy into that.
Yeah. So first one, they went to the wrong tomb. So this theory basically says that Mary and the other Mary, they showed up, these ladies went, they were so just kind of overcome and stricken by their grief. They went to the wrong tomb when they went to go see Jesus and see his body. He was gone. And so instead what happened was then they came back. They told Peter that, hey, Jesus' body is gone. We saw an angel. He said he resurrected. And then Peter takes off and Peter runs to the exact same wrong tomb. So basically he got lost along the way. These ladies got lost along the way. And they went to the wrong tomb of Jesus. And that's kind of the first kind of easily debunked theory that they went to the wrong tomb.
Yeah. I mean, this is something that's very peculiar, partially because of how we know that the tomb was it was guarded, it was sealed, there was a stone laid there.
It was the family tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. He could have easily been like, hey, you guys went to the wrong one.
Right. And so there's lots of different things. The Pharisees definitely would have made a point to say, no, that's not the tomb.
Absolutely.
This is the tomb.
Yeah, as Christianity started to spread, the Pharisees, the Romans, like they all could have been like, hey, you dummies, you went to the wrong tomb. Here's the tomb where his body's guarded. Check this out. Here's the body. We're just going to roll this out for you.
Yeah.
Never happened.
So that seems like a pretty easy to not believe theory, because it's something that, man, if you love someone, if you followed them for 3 years and then you went to the tomb, you would make sure that you knew where that was.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Mass hallucination. Second one, mass hallucination. So this one says that basically everybody that says they saw Jesus after his resurrection, they were all hallucinating. There was some sort of major groupthink, some big social construct that was forcing them to all think they saw the same thing. None of them wanted to speak up. They all were kind of convinced that they saw Jesus because everybody around them was convinced that they saw Jesus.
Yep. This is kind of definitely the influence of modern psychology and the ideas of, like you said, groupthink, of being able to manipulate other people into believing a certain thing in mass. Things like hypnotization, all of that kind of playing in together in this. So what are some of the reasons why that doesn't really make sense?
Yeah, so first of all, like hallucinations and things like that, they can appear. I remember when I was in recon school, when I was in the Army, and it'd been like 20-something hours without any sleep, probably pushing 25, 26 hours. and like you start to see things. Like when you get so tired, you're so exhausted, you're hungry, like you can start to see things. I don't remember like what I saw or like anything like that, but what I can say is that for the rest of us who were all there, like we weren't all seeing the same thing.
Right.
There wasn't a common delusion or a common hallucination to where we were all seeing the same thing. So here for a massive amount of people who I think it's who Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 5:6 or 15:6, he says, after the resurrection, says, then he appeared to more than 500 brothers at one time. So Jesus appeared first to the 12 and then to the 500 other people, and they all had the exact same hallucination. Like, have you seen Batman Begins?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, this isn't Scarecrow with chemical weapons. Yeah, the little spray. They didn't have like mass chemical weapons back then.
Right.
So just the idea that there was this mass hallucination where everybody was hallucinating the exact same thing. And not only did they have this once, but he appeared to them multiple times. Acts 1 tells us that Jesus appeared for 40 days following his resurrection, and he spoke to them about the kingdom.
Right.
So this hallucination, we're supposed to believe, had a effect on a large group of people that lasted for 40 days, and then suddenly it just stopped.
Right. So that's really strange. Also, you have accounts in the Gospels of the physical nature of who Jesus is after the resurrection and before the ascension into heaven. That Thomas, of course, raises the whole thing of, look, you guys all may believe in this. I mean, maybe he was someone who even believed something like this. You guys just saw something. And he says, until I get to put my hand in his side where he was pierced and see the holes.
Thomas gets a bad rap, man.
Yeah,
like,
he really does.
Like, he wanted to see Jesus. He wanted to believe it. And so now everybody just calls him Doubting Thomas. Like, dude was just curious. Like,
yeah. So personal theory is that, before they go to Jerusalem, there's this plot, and the disciples know if Jesus goes to Jerusalem, people are going to try and kill him. And Jesus says, look, I'm going to Jerusalem. And Thomas says, come on, guys, let's go with him and we'll die too. So I feel like Thomas was like a really hardcore guy, totally believed. But Jesus had said, many of you are going to fall away and follow false Christ. And so maybe Thomas is going, are they already following away, like following someone else? So that's kind of my thought on maybe he didn't doubt quite so much. Maybe he wanted a little bit of like assurance, but he gets it. Jesus appears and goes, all right, come put your hand in my side.
And up to this point, like, there's no standard. Jesus had raised Lazarus from the dead with Jesus' power. So that was a third party taking power over Lazarus, raising him from the dead. But for Jesus to be able to use like his own divine power to conquer death in the grave, like, that hadn't happened yet. So Thomas had no standard to go to them, because when Jesus was in the grave, there was no second Jesus to come and raise him from the dead. It was only Jesus. So Thomas is probably thinking what all of us would have thought, like, I want to see this to believe it.
Jesus also, of course, has breakfast on the beach with the disciples after they have this huge catch of fish. After they've fished all night, got nothing. Jesus comes along and says, throw your nets on the other side. They do it, and they catch like 153 fish or something. It's a very specific number. And so they catch these fish, they recognize it's Jesus because of that, and they go and have breakfast, and he eats with them. So this isn't a ghost. It's not some kind of just hallucination that they're seeing and imagining. It's the physical, bodily raised Jesus.
Yeah, that's one thing we can all be thankful for, that Jesus didn't make an institution, is fish for breakfast, because I would not be ready for that. I'm not doing that. All right, so the other one. This is actually a very popular one. The swoon theory. What's the swoon theory?
So the swoon theory basically says that Jesus didn't actually die before he was buried. Jesus was only swooning, and this is the old classic Southern Belle. It's hot outside. That Jesus passed out, or that his heart rate or something about him. He seemed to stop breathing, but he didn't actually stop breathing. That he only seemed to be dead, but was not actually dead. And in fact, in those 3 days he's in the tomb, he actually kind of gets better,
Yeah.
and then leaves the tomb.
All right. So let's talk about this one for a minute.
Yep.
So the swoon theory. First of all, okay, let's acknowledge that people, not so much today, thankfully, but in the past, in history, without modern medical advances, there were people buried alive. Like, it would happen. Sometimes it got so common, especially during the Civil War, that when they were buried, they would bury them and then put a string down that was attached to a bell, so that if they woke up and they weren't actually dead, they could start pulling on the string and ring the bell. Like, that'd be creepy. I don't think there's anything more terrifying than possibly being buried alive. So, like, this stuff did happen. But to say that Jesus was swooning, first of all, let's talk about how good the Romans were at torture and crucifixion. So they scourged him, just brutally beat him to the point to where he couldn't even carry his own cross. They had to get Simon the Cyrene to come along and carry his cross for him. So they beat him. So we're talking about he lost massive amounts of blood, probably had some organ damage beyond tissue damage. Then they nail him to the cross through his hands and through his ankles, like through his feet. Nail went through the bones of his feet and his ankles, where he would be bearing weight. And then the spear went up into his side.
Yeah. And the thing with the crucifixion is it's meant to be a multi-day torturous death where over the course of days, when you're on the cross, you're slumped down. You have to pull yourself and push up on your feet, pull on your hands so you can breathe.
You have to choose where you want to put your weight. Which pain do you want to deal with more, the hands or the feet?
And so you have to breathe in, and then when you slump back down because you're tired of holding yourself, then it pushes all that air back out of your lungs. So this could last for days. The Jews know, the Romans know, Passover is coming, and so to speed along this process, they go to break the legs of both of the men on the cross. So you've got two criminals and Jesus. They go to break the legs of the two. They get to Jesus and notice that he's dead.
He's already dead.
So instead of breaking his legs, they instead choose to pierce him with this spear. And they're pretty good with spears, right? And so from the text it says that when they pierce his side, that water and blood comes out. What's the significance of the
water and blood? So as you are breathing and you're lifting yourself up and bringing yourself down, it's suffocation, but basically what you're doing is your lungs are starting to fill with fluid. So you suffocate almost like by drowning because you can't get rid of that fluid as it's building up in your lungs. Yeah.
So to pierce and to have water and blood come out reveals that like major organ damage is being done. This is not just a little cut on the side. This is some people talk about how the heart has kind of this type of a fluid mix around it, that it could be even that. So I mean, when you're talking lungs, heart, that is serious damage. That alone is on a battlefield like a killing injury.
Yeah, and then he gets up from that, somehow has the strength to roll a stone away from the inside. First of all, he can stand after that nail was just driven through the bones in his legs and his feet. So now he can stand up, he can roll the stone away, and then he can walk, like 7 miles and see some people on the road. But then he can appear to the women, he can appear to the disciples, and he tells them, or he's telling them that he's been resurrected, when really, like, had it only been 3 days and him not resurrect, had he just been swooning, you're not going to be able to convince anybody that you didn't actually die. You're not going to be able to convince anybody that you overcame death, because you are going to be in serious need of some medical attention.
Right.
Like, dude's going to be hurting.
Yeah.
Bad, to where only laying there for 3 days and then come out and be like, look, I'm God, I defeated death, when you would just be kind of crawling along and you would be just in some serious
Not to mention infection
critical
setting in.
condition.
I mean,
Yeah.
goodness. So there's multiple things here that are to the point of where they regularly killed people. The scourging was, the idea is to bring someone as close to death as you can without killing them, and sometimes they would go too far. The crucifixion is meant as this torturous way to kill criminals and treasonous peoples, to make an example of them. And then the spear is meant to take the place of that killing blow of breaking the leg so you can't push up anymore, so the suffocation would happen. Well, if he's already dead, they just cut his side, and this blood and water comes out, showing, okay, he is dead. So the swoon theory does not make a lot of sense. I think,
but it's one of the one that is the most ascribed to at the same time.
Yeah. I think Lee Strobel, in his book Case for Christ, he did some really interesting interviews with medical professionals talking through this process of what would happen from the scourging, from the crucifixion, from the piercing. Is that something someone can come back from? And I mean, I'm not a medical expert. The people he talked to were, and they said, look, nobody's coming back from that.
Yeah. All right, so then the last one, stolen body. So this has actually several elements to it. The stolen body theory is that Jesus didn't actually raise from the dead, but that the body was stolen in order to make it look like he had resurrected. So the first one is that the Pharisees stole the body. And the Pharisees, and some people say the Pharisees, some people will say the Romans, and the common problem with the Pharisees or the Romans stealing the body is once Christianity started to spread, once the disciples started to preach that Jesus has resurrected, they could just present a body. They could just roll it out and say, he didn't resurrect, look, we have the body right here, here it is.
Right. Yep.
And that didn't happen.
No.
They never rolled the body out because they didn't have it.
Right. And one of the reasons why people may think that they had even a desire to take the body is so that the tomb would not become some kind of a shrine or something where people would go to as Jesus was a martyr. So they would take the body away so it couldn't become that. But as soon as you see this, Christianity, the way, as it was called, you would definitely want to present the body and say, no, we took the body, here it is.
Yep.
This is all false.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen. So you had the thought that Pharisees may have stolen it, maybe the Romans had stolen it, but then the other thought is that the disciples had stolen it. And we've seen cults, we've seen groups do some crazy things for leaders. Like, I remember I think it was in college, I had to do a project in one of my philosophy classes, and for some reason, I don't know how I landed on, but it was this cult called Heaven's Gate. Heaven's Gate was this cult in California, and they believed, I think it was the Hale-Bopp comet, it was like mid-90s, maybe around 96, and they believed that, this is true, that Jesus was on a UFO behind the comet, and as the comet passed by Earth, he was going to take his people with him. And so this is all true. They got decked out in Nike gear, like Nike jumpsuits, Nike sweatbands, Nike shoes, like Nike everything. And then they drank the Kool-Aid and mass suicide.
Yeah, the Kool-Aid is laced with...
I think it was cyanide.
Yeah.
So they drank the Kool-Aid, and then they all went and laid in their bed, and I think how we all know the story is like two of them didn't drink it, and they left. Like, they escaped. When everybody in bed decked out in Nike.
Hundreds of people died because they believed this guy who had told them.
Yeah. So there was Heaven's Gate, Jonestown, the guy who, same thing, made all those people drink the Kool-Aid, and that was hundreds of people. So we've seen people do crazy things like this. Like, cults exist, we know this. So it's not crazy to think that the followers of who had just lost their leader would do something to try to make his foretelling of his death and resurrection like manifest. So it's not crazy to think that. But the disciples were drastically changed following the resurrection of Christ, weren't they?
Yeah, there's a big difference when you are reading through any of the gospel accounts and the book of Acts that you see a huge change come about on these people. That these are regular folks, fishermen, there's tax collectors, there's, all of these different guys who have no formal education really. And when they're going and preaching, they're preaching with boldness.
Mm-hmm.
Peter's no longer like denying Christ, he's boldly professing him. Thomas is not at the point of doubting, he is like, let's go. And there's this drastic change of now these people have the ability to speak well, with boldness, they're leading out, and then when persecution comes along,
none of them recant.
Right. And this is the difference in if you have something that you know is false, and you're pretending and playing it up as if it's true, when you're arrested, when you're told, look, if you don't quit talking about this, we're going to stone you to death, you go, whoa, okay, guys, just kidding. None of them do that.
Not a single one of them recants. Not a single one of them crosses that line and contradicts what he's preaching or what the others are preaching. So I think if you were to take some creative liberty, you can almost assure that when they were arrested, when they were confronted by authorities, it would have been like, say, they probably presented them with the option of, hey, if you tell us where the body is, if you tell us what's actually true, if you tell us what you guys did, we'll let you go, we'll just take care of the rest of them. And nobody recants.
That's not what happened.
And the recorded deaths that we have of all the disciples is they were martyred. Yes, John was exiled to the island of Patmos to die. Like, that was an execution sentence. That was a death sentence. You're going there to die by yourself, man.
Yeah.
Like, they were all martyred from what we know.
Yeah. And this is, something very particular about this is remembering that if you know something is false, it's not worth dying for.
Exactly.
If you believe something is absolutely true, you're willing to die for it. And this is why, some cults, yes, they believe that something is true, and so they're willing to die for it. If the disciples had taken the body of Christ, they would know that it was false, and they would not be willing to lay down their lives for that.
Yeah, so that kind of brings us into that transition of, so these are the theories, and here's kind of the major ramification, or here's the things that followed. So we talked first about the wrong tomb, then we talked about the mass hallucination, then the swoon theory, then the stolen body. And following all that, following the resurrection of Christ, two major things happened. First, we just talked about the disciples. They were radically changed. These guys who were very cowardly and abandoned Jesus upon his arrest, who had no discernible skills, they were fishermen. We didn't even talk about the Roman guard that would have been guarding the tomb. Had the disciples showed up to try to steal it, we usually, I think when you see kids' coloring books, you usually see 1 or 2 Roman guards. It probably would have been closer to between 12 to 20 Roman guards at least. And these 11 at the time, fishermen, with no military experience, somehow overpowered this Roman guard of professional war-hardened soldiers and stole the body of Jesus. But they were radically changed following the resurrection and the appearance of Jesus Christ to them. And they lived out the rest of their lives proclaiming the gospel, and they died preaching the gospel. They were killed for the gospel.
That's right.
So we know the disciples changed, but then Jesus' family.
Yeah.
His brother. Do you have any siblings?
Yeah.
Yeah. What if your brother told you he was God?
I would definitely have a problem with it.
Yeah. You wouldn't believe him, would you?
No, that would be silly, right? And anybody that has a sibling, okay, so we have siblings that we know have faults and have shortcomings and things like that. But can you imagine being the half brother, half sister of Jesus, who actually is God? He never sins. We don't have any accounts of him doing any miracles as a child or anything like that.
Imagine asking your mom, who's your favorite kid, and your brother being Jesus.
Why can't you just be more like Jesus? So this idea, there are problems, and the Bible talks about how even Jesus's half brother he's not all the way on board with Jesus as the Messiah during his ministry. But then he goes on and he's like one of the main
Yeah.
leaders of the church.
Yeah, his brother James was not a follower of Jesus during his ministry.
Mm.
It wasn't until following his resurrection, and even he is martyred for it.
Yeah.
He is killed for believing his own brother is the Messiah. Like,
That's a big difference.
that's a huge difference.
Yeah. So when we think about the resurrection, okay, and you know, one of the things for me is Paul talks about if the resurrection is false, we're to be pitied above all, right? Like our faith hinges on this idea of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So it's extremely important to us. Though as we look at our faith, the resurrection of Jesus points toward the fact that he has power over sin and death, and that our hope is in his power, his ability, not our own.
Yeah.
And that should cause radical transformation in our life, just like it did in other people's.
Yeah, I believe it's Colossians 1 in the centrality of Christ when it says Jesus is the firstborn of the dead. It doesn't mean that he's the first person to come back from the dead. Like, it's not in order of sequence, but it's in order of ownership. It's a position of status where Jesus has the right and the power and the authority over death. I spent 11 years in the Army, and like the structure of the Army is by rank. Like, you acknowledge with formality people who are ranked above you. And so by saying the firstborn of the dead, it's saying Jesus outranks death. Like, he is above death. Death is subordinate to Jesus. Death has to submit to Jesus. And because of that, in his love for us, he offers that life now.
Right.
That's amazing.
It is.
Yeah.
And that is what gives us boldness. It gives us courage. It creates transformation in us. Is not in, I can be a better person. I can do this. I have something to give to God. It's that, man, Christ has already accomplished what has to be done. My faith is in his accomplished work. And my life is changed and transformed by this hope in, like, his resurrection, what he's done.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yep. And then Paul, later on when he's writing in Corinthians, and he talks about the resurrection, because Paul wasn't a follower of Jesus. He persecuted Christians until Jesus met him on that Damascus road. And then Paul, in that same chapter in Corinthians 15, referring back to the resurrection of Christ, he's saying he appeared to 500 people. He's saying, but you don't have to take my word for it. He's saying most of those people that saw Jesus, they're still alive. Go ask them.
Right.
Go ask them about it.
Yeah.
Like, the consistency of the testimonies of people who saw Jesus after his resurrection, and then the coming of the Holy Spirit, the offer of eternal life that he gives us now, the power and the indwelling of the Holy Spirit that we get to have because Jesus conquered death, it's the gospel. It's beautiful.
So I hope that as we've kind of talked through this, it's given you some insight, some challenging thoughts to maybe consider.
Just fun things to think about.
Yeah. And we're going to continue the discussion tomorrow night in our Zoom meetings for middle school and high school. So we encourage you to jump on there. Middle school's at 7, high school's at 8. If you don't know how to access that, you can either contact us through our email, through the office. You can contact us on Facebook or Instagram. And the email has gone out to all of our CSM members that we have. So you should have the link. But join us on there. We'll have some discussion. I think we're going to play some games tomorrow, which will be pretty cool.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
And so that's going to wrap it up for us tonight, I think. Any final thoughts?
No, of course, a lot of thought has gone into these conspiracy theories, so we just gave you a very brief overview. If you want to look into them, look into them. I mean, I think they're kind of fun to talk about, to think about, to see what people say, but Jesus resurrected, like almost by process of elimination based on other conspiracy theories. It takes more faith to believe in an alternative option than it does to believe that Jesus is alive and sitting at the right hand of God right now.
Amen. All right. Have a good week. We'll see you.
See you guys.